everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
That it's very difficult to know how a healthy microbiome looks like because in every person, it is completely different. And so the approach we had was basically, first of all, learn and understand how the microbiome is individual with every single person, and then go further and develop medical diagnostic products that can actually be used for diagnostic purposes.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Barbara Sladek, Managing Director and Founder of Biome Diagnostics. Welcome to the show today.
Very nice being here with you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So let's first discuss the importance of our gut system and how intestinal microbiome affect our overall health, including our immune system to cognitive functions. And there are potentially trillions of bacteria, and these dynamic multi-species play a critical role in our adaptive immune system. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more.
Thank you very much. It's actually very exciting and interesting because currently we find out even more every day about the microbiome. It was even announced as being one of the super organs that we have. The microbiome itself, it's the scientific name for gut flora that some people know, and it comprises all microbes that we have in our gut or intestinal system, meaning bacteria, fungi, viruses, and proteobacteria or archaeobacteria. Together, it is expected that the amount is about 39 billion microbes. However, obviously, nobody has calculated them. It's more likely that it's basically a calculation.
If you could just give us a baseline of historically, what has been the traditional diagnostics approach to understanding the gut microbiome?
So the majority of the microbiome are actually bacteria. So over 95% are expected to be bacteria that are responsible for what we are and what is mainly used also for the diagnostic fields. Generally speaking, it was usually done via bacteria cultures, where you basically take a sample, you put it into a petri dish, and you see what is growing, and then you can count the groups of bacteria that you can see. It's still a very valid technology if you want to find a specific pathogenic bacteria, for example, or something like that. But what is even more interesting is the balance of the microbiome. So these 39 billion microbes, where you can say most of them are bacteria, we know roughly 1,500 different kinds of bacteria. Most of them cannot be cultivated. So we need new technologies in the diagnostic field to actually be able to see the entire spectrum of all bacteria. The best way to do that is via next generation sequencing. So next generation sequencing is now very on vogue, or a lot of people actually know it thanks to COVID, where the different kind of strains were detected via sequencing. But in general, what this technology does, it reads the DNA of whatever you give them. And in our case, it reads the next generation sequencing, reads the DNA of all the bacteria in a sample. You can vary between a whole genome sequencing approach or that you look at a very specific amount of genes in bacteria. The most common one is the 16S gene, which has all the information on it that has the taxonomical level of the bacteria and even some functions that the bacteria have. And with that information, you know exactly how to classify the bacteria, you know how to quantify and qualitatively analyze the bacteria at the same time, including predictively, one has to say, the functions. And that can be then used for a diagnostic approach.
And that is exactly what Biome Diagnostics is doing, is my understanding in terms of the diagnostic approach. And of course, complementing that next-gen DNA sequencing with your own machine learning, but also this proprietary knowledge database and thousands of samples with advanced bioinformatics and, of course, your different models and algorithms. So if you could just give us a nutshell in terms of how is your approach much more systematic, more comprehensive, and it's slightly different from the other approaches that other diagnostic companies are taking.
Thank you for that. So the first thing for us was actually to understand microbiome data. As you know, there are a lot of not only companies, but especially very bright scientific people out there that look at that. And our approach was a little bit different because we said, okay, well, we first of all have to understand how the microbiome looks like. And just looking at you and me, the issue with the microbiome is that I'm allowed to assume, I hope, that we're both more or less healthy, even though we look completely different. And it's the same thing with the microbiome, that it's very difficult to know how a healthy microbiome looks like, because in every person, it is completely different. And so the approach we had was basically, first of all, learn and understand how the microbiome is individual with every single person, and then go further and develop medical diagnostic products that can actually be used for diagnostic purposes.
Well, this is a very exciting field. And again, I think the piece that we just are about to talk about is the cancer therapy aspects. Your CE-IVD marked diagnostic tool was launched last year. And this tool acts as an enabler towards personalized treatment with modern cancer immunotherapy. So I wonder if you could talk about that and the importance, how this could really help change things on the oncology side.
So the exciting thing is actually that our main driver is to personalize therapy. And we realized that especially in the immunotherapy, the biggest thing is that it's very difficult to individualize. It's still depending on the cancer type. The response rate of immunotherapy is quite low. It's at between about 30 to 35% if you look at all the different kind of cancer types. And we were wondering why. And the reason why is because, interestingly, what was found out recently is that the immune system, between 70 and 80% of the immune system actually sits in the gut, in the microbiome. And what the immune therapy does when having cancer is it re-enables the own immune system to understand the response and to understand what and how a cancer cell looks like and how to kill the cancer cell. So basically, you can say, when you know how the immune system looks like, how healthy it is, you can revert back and then say, well, immune system looks well. Most likely, the response to an immunotherapy where you need the immune system as well will be a good one. And we were surprised when we did our first study and the second validation study that we found exactly this combination and this association between the microbiome and the immunotherapy. So with very high accuracy, we can actually say this person will respond to a cancer immunotherapy or not. What was very interesting for us is that it is actually cancer type agnostic. So you can use it for any kind of cancer, because as you can imagine, the immunotherapy targets the immune system regardless of cancer type. And based on that, we even can now say a likeliness for having or suffering from severe side effects. So one of the most common severe side effects that one has when having immunotherapy is that the own immune system cannot distinguish between cancer cells and healthy cells, and then also targets the healthy cells. However, if the doctor knows that in advance, he can actually counteract and has some potential solutions how to overcome the side effects.
This is a very, very exciting field and very cutting edge as well. And certainly for patients, but certainly the physicians that are overseeing some of these immunotherapies, to be able to have this type of insight before they actually proceed with the immunotherapy is very powerful. Can you talk to us about either current but also future clinical studies, how that helps inform, and then during the immunotherapy and then post, into, in fact, the hypotheses or these empirical research really holds true all the way through?
So we do have a decent amount of running. So we have about 12 running clinical studies currently to look at the different kinds of cancer types and to make certain that we know exactly what we're talking about, because obviously, even though it's already on the market and everything, it's still early days and you never know. The second step is basically what do you do with that information. So on the one hand, we are working and already have some decent decision tree on which kind of decision the physician then can go and which kind of treatment he or she can choose from. And secondly, the idea would be then to also focus on the intervention. So basically, what do you do if you say, well, the microbiome is not very good, the immune system is not very good, most likely the patient will not respond? Well, most likely, the nice thing about the microbiome is that you can influence it. So the idea is that you then can influence the microbiome, the immune system, by using, for example, stool transplantation, fecal microbiome transplantation, where the technology is really well established already. The question is just, how do you know who a good donor will be or not, and which donor fits to which patient? And that is what we're working on currently. And where we're actually, the first results are really good. And like that, everybody could respond to any kind of therapy, because just to think out of the box, the microbiome does not only affect cancer, obviously. You can go to any disease you want. You can go for multiple sclerosis, Parkinson, Alzheimer, longevity, everything you want, actually.
So this is interesting in terms of the candidate that is providing that healthy stool. How do you go about identifying those candidates, and then how do you actually grow sufficient amount of microbiome to then harvest it and then transplant it?
So our technology tells us who is going to be a good donor and who is going to be the perfect fit. We do that again by using next generation sequencing, analyzing thoroughly the sample, and then doing a proper pipeline and a proper analysis. When it comes to actually doing and establishing the fecal microbiome transplantation and putting, for example, the microbiome transplant into capsules, there are a lot of companies and also research companies out there that work on that. And the technology for that is actually well established. So it would be just picking these technologies from the market.
And how long does it take before transplantation that their own unique microbiome starts to replicate the right types of microbiomes to be able to actually be healthy enough so that they can actually undergo immunotherapies?
So that's interesting. It actually is very individual. And depends on the age of the person, because interestingly, the microbiome changes over time. So we get born with a very little bit until no microbiome in our gut, and it develops until puberty, and then it's stable during the adolescence, and then it basically goes back down, and the diversity of the microbiome loses again from the age of 70 roughly. So it depends on the age of the person and also on the lifestyle that this person has, whether the new microbiome will be working immediately or not. Generally, there are quite a few studies out there that say you have to do a fecal microbiome transplantation every 4 times in general. It should work after a few days for the first time.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Now, of course, most of us are aware of the power of prebiotics from fruits and vegetables and grains, as well as probiotics from raw apple cider vinegar, Korean kimchi, and other types of live culture foods. How can our lifestyle perhaps help us to find that perfect balance for our individual immune system so that we're not in a position where we potentially have things that are not quite balanced and needing these more extreme forms of transplantation?
So the food diversity, it's very easy to actually start establishing a more diverse microbiome by, for example, just changing the supermarket to one goes, or buying a different kind of salad or a different kind of apple or fruit. Because like that, you increase already the diversity of the microbiome by a lot, or just changing the producer of the milk. And having a more diverse microbiome is one of the key things.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And very practical as well. I want to transition to talk about your pipeline, Biome 1 for immune checkpoint inhibitor response prediction test, and then Biome, a high-end microbiome analysis for at home. They're already in commercialization stage, I believe. If you could elaborate on both of those, that'd be great.
So Biome is our lifestyle brand. It's accessible from everywhere. In Europe, we're the European market leaders on that. It's an easy self-test to do at home. It gets shipped back to us, to Austria. We analyze it in our partner lab, and then the person gets a very detailed report about their own microbiome, how they can enhance it with very practical recommendations. And also we can look at some health axes. So basically, for example, how the gut and the brain work together. That is one product we have on the market since 2020. On the other hand, we have Biome 1. We were talking just about this, knowing which kind of immunotherapy is the right one. That's on the market since November 2022. And it's going quite well. And so far, the response is really well. And this year, what we're going to launch is, it's already fully established and developed, Biome CRC, a screening tool for colorectal cancer, because with only one stool sample, we know with high accuracy whether somebody either has colorectal cancer or is going to develop colorectal cancer within the next few years, because we can even screen for adenoma. The nice thing about colorectal cancer is that the tough thing about it is it's one of the toughest cancers. It's under the three most popular cancer types in the world. But it's also one of the cancer types where nobody has to die from, because you just can cut out a little bit of the gut. The only thing one would have to do is go very regularly for colonoscopy. And that is something nobody wants. But just pooing, it's actually an easy one. You can screen with quite high accuracy for that. So,
well, as someone who recently had to go through a colonoscopy, I can say that the Biome CRC will be very welcome. And the other fact is that colonoscopy, at least in the US, occurs usually every 10 years. And that's a long period of time before something could happen. So the fact that you can actually have this colorectal cancer screening test in a fairly easy, accessible means more frequently and predictively, I think that's a very powerful thing. Talk to us about Biome FMT, which is a targeted fecal microbiotic transplantation and prototype testing. And then finally, the Biome drug microbiome based on therapeutics that's at the POC stage.
Yes, exactly. So basically, Biome FMT is a possibility for screening for donors. You can do it for any kind of disease if you want. We are also considering, or basically in the very early clinical phases that you say, for example, for Parkinson, Alzheimer, we know that they are located in the gut and that the gut is responsible for such very severe diseases. So what if you give all people just fecal capsules with some other microbiomes in there, and like that you can prolong until this disease will actually break out? I think for a future that sounds really nice. Or you can also target autism or multiple sclerosis with that, so that people that actually suffer from these diseases won't suffer at that moment, and where you can cure such diseases.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, I think it's truly profound in terms of the possibilities, and of course, we're very interested in understanding the clinical evidence around some of these things. Certainly, it is absolutely powerful. I want to talk a little bit about business strategy. It seems very prudent that as a company, you guys have taken an approach that's diagnostics first before heading down the path of therapeutics that could potentially be very costly and have a higher risk clinical gates. So if you could talk a little bit about your paradigm and how that could evolve over time.
Before actually starting my own company, I was for quite a long time with Siemens Healthineers, working in the molecular diagnostic field. And one thing that is really crucial is that molecular diagnostics, first of all, it's expensive. You can have nice business models, and it has nothing to do with the general things where people believe what diagnostics is, especially investors. And the second thing is that especially molecular diagnostic tools like our tool is crucial to be able to personalize medicine. What the history also showed over the last few years is that the microbiome is still a very young field. And there were quite a few companies out there that basically said, well, we're going straight for therapeutics, and they completely failed. And because of that, we said, well, we first want to understand how it works. And then we go the next step for therapeutics, because we know how it works, and we can use that knowledge. Also, science is going further, and like that, it's safer to develop things. And so far, it's not the worst approach.
Well, I'm smiling because I very much agree with the approach that you guys are taking, and it makes a lot of sense. And certainly there has been some pretty heavy failures. So it's a good learning from them to not repeat that. Now, in terms of your success and then of course the company's success, it's been pretty amazing. Last year you were named Female Entrepreneur of the Year in Vienna. And the company also were recognized for EY Scale Up Award in biotech and healthcare. If you could tell us a little bit more.
We are very grateful, actually, to be able to be allowed to also have some awards, that some awards were given. The best thing that we actually experienced last November was that we were at the Web Summit, and we were under the top 3 companies, and then won the public votum by a lot, by over 60%. Which also, to be frank, gives us some confidence that we are on the right path. And it's an important way to actually transfer our message, because so far, why not? It's an easy way, and it's an easy way to revolutionize healthcare. And we want to have that everybody has access to such tools.
Very exciting. And then, of course, your products are going to be available in EU. But I wonder, again, EU in itself is a very heterogeneous market and has a lot of challenges in terms of the different domiciles. After EU, are there plans to go to different regions of the world, like, for example, North America?
Yes. So with my Biome, we do have a few customers, especially also white label customers. They use our technology, but sell it under their brand, for example. That works very well. And with Biome One, we are already in the FDA approval. It's very nice and easier for us because our validation study was accepted by the FDA. So we expect to be end of this year available in the US. Before that, we are available as RUO tool, so research use only tool, or as LDT, laboratory developed test in the US.
My final question for you is, why are you so passionate about what you're doing?
That when I suffer from cancer, which I hope will never, ever happen, I want to have the right tools. And I think one has 2 different kind of possibilities nowadays, either focus on climate or focus on health and make the healthcare systems better. Because so far, I haven't seen one healthcare system that works very well. And it's up to us to change and leave the world so that it's good for the next generation.
So on that note, I've been joined by Dr. Barbara Sladek, Managing Director of Biome Diagnostics. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.